G'day legends, a little bit of a different style of video for me today, but I do think that this one is important because some really interesting things came up in Dana White's post-fight press conference from last night's event at UFC 303. So rather than doing a full-on post-fight event recap, which I think we can sort of talk about some of the finer details during the week, I wanted to draw attention to two massive things that Dana White was talking about in his post-fight press conference. One of them, and the one that we're going to start with, is Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou and Dana White's sort of relationship that he has built with the Saudis, okay? Every single time that this fight has been spoken about, Dana White has completely just gotten rid of it. But last night was the night where Dana White actually didn't shrug it off for once, which I found to be incredibly interesting. The second thing that we are going to be talking about is Alex Pereira eventually moving up to heavyweight and a reporter asking him, why aren't you that interested in that fight? And Dana White's explosion at the media about Jon Jones, which has nothing to do with whether or not Alex Pereira can move up or not, went on for a couple of minutes. It was so strange to watch Dana White blow up for no reason. It really does make you wonder why he's investing so heavily in Jon Jones. So let's start away with the first one of Dana White's post-UFC 300 interview and him talking about his relationship with the Saudis. And he gets asked very poignantly about Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Now, notice what he says here, and I am going to have it sped up to 1.5 because it is a bit slow listening to these guys talk. So we'll play it for a bit and then we'll go back and talk about it.
Dana, a couple back here.
Yep.
Yeah. First, it was recently announced that for Noche UFC, the UFC will have its first title partner, Riyadh Season. What were some of the factors that compelled the UFC to do this?
I spent $17 million on production and it's not even September yet.
Personally, just with that one, I love that they're like, Dana, how come the Riyadh Season is hosting Noche UFC, a UFC event for Mexican Independence Day in Las Vegas? How come the Saudis are paying for that? And Dana just straight up says, because I spent too much money on it. All the while, Dana has been talking about how this is going to be the biggest event in combat sports history. And he believes in that so much, he's putting his own money where his mouth is, except now that he isn't, he's putting the Saudis' money where his mouth is. But listen to the second question that comes up.
I spent $17 million on production and it's not even September yet.
But just one more on that note. I know it's something you've traditionally been very much against, but what, if anything, could Riyadh Season do to compel you to cross-promote? Obviously, there's that Francis Ngannou fight that you think is not going to happen, but is there anything Riyadh could do to maybe twist your arm on that?
Well,
is there anything that Riyadh Season, so is there anything that the Saudi monies could do that would open you up to cross-promoting? Now listen to Dana White's answer here.
See, there's that Francis Ngannou fight that you think is not going to happen, but is there anything Riyadh could do to maybe twist your arm on that?
well, I actually respect Sheikh Turki. He's a nice guy, and we have actually formed a relationship over the last couple of months. I respect what he's done with boxing. This is the only guy that could ever pull this off and making these big fights. And the fight was good. It was a good, entertaining fight. You didn't have guys that went in there and tried to avoid a fight so they could try to hopefully get to the next big payday. I think that what this guy's done in a short amount of time is pretty incredible. So we're obviously talking about lots of different options with this guy, and I respect him. I like him. So we'll see what the future holds.
Thank you.
Not a no. Not a no. Dana White right there is being asked straight up, what do you think about cross-promotion? And ever since the UFC did cross-promotion in the past, where they felt like they got a little bit stiffed on the deal, Dana White has been notoriously against cross-promotion. But I think there's two really important things here. Number one, the Saudis are willing to cover the tab for the UFC when they put on big events and start pumping money into their fight nights. And Dana White loves money. Number two, Francis Ngannou was just knocked out. And Jon Jones is on his way out as well. If Jon Jones beats Stipe, then he is going to be telling everybody that Jon Jones is the greatest fighter of all time. And with both fighters on their way out, with Francis Ngannou aging up, he has bad knees, he was just knocked out brutally in boxing. With Jon Jones about to become the heavyweight GOAT, that's what they'll say when he eventually knocks out the heavyweight GOAT. With Jon Jones about to step into the mantle of the greatest fighter at heavyweight or at light heavyweight, this fight is going to create so much hype and so much money. The one fight that fight fans all over the world have wanted to see. And Dana White is a gambler. He is a notorious gambler that loves crazy odds and big moments. And I don't see him being able to say no to the Saudis dropping $1 billion onto the table for Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. And Dana White having his new favorite fighter, Jon Jones, go in there against a Francis Ngannou and hopefully beat him at least in the wrestling and be able to say that he did have the best fighter of all time. Usually whenever Dana White gets asked this question, the answer is Francis didn't want that fight. Francis was too scared. This time Dana White gets given that question after the Saudis just pay for UFC Saudi Arabia, after the Saudis say that they want to pay Zack Snyder to make a movie about the UFC, after the Saudis pick up the tab for the most expensive event put up in fighting history. After all those things happen, 1, 2, 3, they ask him, so what about Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou? And for the first time ever, it's not a no out of Dana White's mouth. Moving on to the second thing, which is going to be about Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones. This one is so wild to me. He gets asked, just why are you against that? And we're going to have to listen to this one. This is why that this video playing right now of Dana White is on 1.5 speed. Because he goes on about a 5-minute rant about why Jon Jones is the greatest pound-for-pound fighter in the world, when all the reporter did was ask him, what about Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight? Let's listen to it.
Over to your left over here.
Yeah.
What is your reticence, or has been your reticence, about Alex at heavyweight? Because you've never seemed to be into it, right? And even the way you describe the story with Rogan, you don't seem to be into it. Why not?
It's not that I'm not into it. The guy was a middleweight, then moves up to light heavyweight. He's had a couple fights there, defended his title. But it's not like this guy's been in the division for 2 years and, he ran through everybody that's in the division. It's like, come on, what's next? At least let him move to heavyweight. I think that when you...
This is one thing that really upsets me. It kind of annoys me, right? If Alex Pereira fights Magomed Ankalaev in Abu Dhabi towards the end of the year, then he has essentially cleaned out the division as it stands. Like, everyone else is sort of lost. Like, you'd have to wait for Jamal Hill versus Alexander Rakic to really find a true contender. I do believe that there is no reason in the world that we cannot have Jon Jones versus Stipe in November and let them both retire. Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane next month. Tom Aspinall might win that one. And Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev in Abu Dhabi. I do think Alex Pereira would probably win that fight. But then after that, why not have Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall for the undisputed heavyweight title sometime early next year in 2025, in January or in February? That scenario right there is 100% plausible. But for some reason, Dana White just doesn't see a world where Alex Pereira could do enough to move up and actually challenge for the heavyweight title.
Think about this. Like, when those two squared up, not just him, Yuri too. When you see me standing in the middle of this guy, these guys are fucking monsters, man. They're big guys. Imagine that they were both middleweights at one time. It's insane. But they look good at light heavyweight. It's a whole nother level going up to heavyweight. I mean, even as big as Jon Jones is, as good as Jon Jones is, when Jon Jones was moving up to heavyweight, we're like, this is going to be interesting. It wasn't.
But don't you think, like, when you look at it, you go, Alex was 230 today. I saw his thing on the scale. He was 230. If he puts on 15 pounds, he's the same weight as Jon. And you're talking about perhaps the greatest single accomplishment in combat sports history, right? Doing what Alex would do if he does that. And, you normally embrace those kind of big historic things. And this one you don't seem to have that same fervor for.
Not true. If he cleaned out a division and we were like, there's literally nobody left for this guy to fight. And he's 37. If he wants to move up to heavyweight, that's not the case. And when you think about, you said he was
One more fight left, and that could be the case. That could be the case by early next year.
230 today, right? Chuck and Forrest Griffin used to walk around at 230, and they would cut down to 205. That's not big. Some of these heavyweights are, 265. They're cutting to 265. It's just a whole nother level. I mean, that's why I think this is the problem with the conversation that we're having here, and why people...
This is where he starts. Now he's just going to get into a Jon Jones tirade, when all this question is, why do you feel like Alex Pereira doesn't deserve to move up to heavyweight? That's the only question that it was. Or not even, why do you think he doesn't deserve to move up to light heavyweight, to move up to heavyweight? The question was simply, what have you got against it?
People aren't giving Jon Jones the respect for pound. This fucking guy destroyed the best heavyweight in the division. Easily made it look like nothing. Jon Jones is the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the greatest fighter fucking ever. Period. End of story.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but he hasn't fought in a long time. But in Stipe, or in a longer time,
He got hurt.
I get it. I'm not criticizing.
He was trying to fight.
I'm just saying, yeah, no.
Yeah, well, it's not like he's just fucking sitting around and doesn't want to fight. The guy came to fight. It's the first injury he's ever had. And listen to me, I'm not defending Jon Jones. You know what I mean? Jon Jones has been one of my biggest fucking headaches in the entire time that I've been in this company, right? And, the guy hasn't been...
The reporter is just trying to ask him about whether or not Alex Pereira could move up to heavyweight. And all Dana White wants to do is go off about how good Jon Jones is. Jon Jones has got nothing to do with this conversation right now. Jon Jones might be retired by the end of the year, man.
The model, fighter in the company. No matter what you think of Jon Jones, he's the fucking best ever, and he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. Well, except that he hasn't fought.
What is with, why is Dana White being this way? Look how angry he's getting at this guy.
The guy hasn't been the model, fighter in the company. No matter what you think of Jon Jones, he's the fucking best ever, and he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. Well, except that he hasn't fought in the last year, so he's not.
Because he got hurt.
But if you don't...
If you were coming into a fight and you fucking got hurt, that means you're not the pound for pound best fighter in the world anymore? How does that even make sense? It doesn't make sense.
When he fights,
right? If he was sitting out and fucking getting arrested and running around or whatever, and you're like, well, Jon Jones is inactive, I'd say, maybe you're right. But as an educated...
Also, number one pound for pound fighter in the world is Islam Makhachev, okay? Just because Jon Jones could put on like 20 pounds of beer gut weight, walk in there and out-wrestle Cyril Gane, who is a stand-up kickboxer and could get out-wrestled by Francis Ngannou with no knees, does not make you the pound-for-pound number one fighter in the world. When Islam Makhachev is in there, piecing up Dustin Poirier, piecing up Alexander Volkanovski, and out-wrestling all of them at the same time. Islam Makhachev is the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I don't understand why Dana White thinks the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now is the GOAT list. They are two completely different things.
Adult who knows the fight business. You cannot deny that while Jon Jones is active, he is the greatest fighter in the world.
Did I not say that?
Yes. I don't know what you're arguing about here. I don't even know how we're in this conversation. Where are the helicopters when you need them?
Because you're...
What has Jon Jones got on Dana White? I think Dana White has dug in so deeply on this Jon Jones needs to fight Stipe Miocic to be the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He has dug in so deeply on that. And if there's one thing that Dana White loves and the UFC loves, it is control of the narrative. That is their entire business, is to sell us a story about what is happening. And unfortunately, because of independent podcasts and independent MMA YouTube, the entire world knows that Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic is a goddamn joke of a fight and should not be happening. So even mentioning heavyweight, even mentioning what have you got against Alex Pereira moving up, even though that might be him moving up against Curtis Blades at the start of next year. That might be him moving up against Tom Aspinall later this year or at the start of next year. It doesn't have to be Jon Jones. Jon Jones might retire in November, but just the conversation of heavyweight makes Dana White break down into this nonsense about how Jon Jones is the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And if you disagree with that, you aren't educated enough to talk about fighting at all. Even though Jon Jones lost against Dominic Reyes, lost against a one-legged Thiago Santos, and had a rough, close fight with Anthony Smith, who couldn't beat someone in a weight class below him on a day's notice, that somehow makes Jon Jones the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Dana White has just dug in and invested too much into this narrative of whether or not Jon Jones should be fighting Stipe Miocic, and to have any argument about that in front of Dana White sets him on this absolute tirade. Even if you don't bring up Jon Jones, you just bring up the word heavyweight. He starts screaming about Jon Jones pound for pound this, Jon Jones pound for pound that. Jon Jones must have something on Dana White. Or is it that there is a deal going on between the UFC and the Saudis who own the PFL, where it is Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou, and that deal might be closer to happening than we actually believe? Could that be what Zack Snyder is employed for to be making a movie about? To see the biggest cross-promotion fight to ever happen? And to keep that deal alive and the price tag that comes with that deal, could that be why Dana White needs to build Jon Jones up so much? Needs to keep his name at such a high value? Because Dana White is looking to put together some sort of crazy deal with the Saudis involving a Hollywood movie with Zack Snyder. It's just weird to me that before this very question was asked, you get a question about whether or not Jon Jones could fight Francis Ngannou, and you don't get a no out of Dana. And then you get a what about Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight? And it's, if you don't think Jon Jones is the best fighter in the world, you're an idiot. Doesn't like these things. It's very strange. Very, very strange to watch Dana White flip out at his post-fight press conference. That is it for this video. Let me know down there in the comments, why do you think Dana White is so determined to make Jon Jones seem like the best fighter in the world no matter what, and just ignore his number one pound-for-pound fighter, Islam Makhachev? Let me know down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead, leave a like. Tomorrow's video is going to be dropping, and that is the thank you video for everybody who followed this channel all the way up to 1,000 subscribers and donated for the Xbox to play UFC 5 live on the channel. Until then, you'll have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.